Welcome to the Realizations Podcast. I'm Andrea Gordon, your host, and I'm excited to explore the world of real estate with you. In a world where perceptions often overshadow reality, Realizations seeks to redefine what it means to be a realtor. Join me as we peel back the layers of the industry, uncovering inspiring stories and celebrating the good in real estate. Whether you're a homeowner, a fellow realtor, or simply curious, this podcast is for you. Welcome to Realizations, where perceptions meet reality. Let's dive right in. Welcome, everybody, to Realizations, the podcast where we talk about everything real estate and the value that real estate agents pose in the world. Today, I'm really excited, especially because of her name, to have Andrea Blum on. And how do you pronounce your last name? Is it Blum or Bloom?
Blum.
Blum. With us, she's from Toronto, and she's not just a real estate agent, she's also a real estate coach. So I have quite a few questions I'm going to ask her today about how she got into the business, her life here, how she came to be exactly who she is, and why she does what she does. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me, Andrea. A pleasure.
Of course. So you got your license in 2011. And by 2018, you decided that you also wanted to be a coach. Tell me a little bit about the genesis of you wanting to be a coach. How did that happen?
I don't think it's something that I planned on. I think it became very natural for me just because of my passion of sharing what I was doing. I think it started by me just answering questions to others in the office. And I just became passionate about explaining how to become a listing agent because that was a big deal in my office. Since the day I started in real estate, I was a listing agent, and I was kind of adamant of working with buyers. Not that buyers are bad, we appreciate any client, but I was passionate about getting listings from cold outreach, not just my sphere, which I didn't have as a new immigrant. And people wanted to know how I do that. How do you get listings without actually asking your sphere for business? So that's how it came about. And then before you know it, repeating yourself, it's not an easy thing to do. And I thought, okay, how about I say one thing at once to more people? And save time and have an option to do that. And then I actually put together an online course that teaches how to become a listing agent based on something that I've done my entire career and really helped me tremendously. And as I said, from cold outreach, not from your sphere of influence. And then as time passes, some of these students that took my online course asked me if I'm willing to do the one-on-one coaching, which I end up doing. And that's how I end up in coaching.
Very, very cool. How many hours a week do you think you coach versus how many hours a week do you do practice real estate?
I only coach Mondays, and I coach half an hour. I have 6 coaching clients every year. I don't take more than that. It's about managing my time. And I have a couple of agents that are part of my circle within Real and with my organization that are getting coaching from me, either a group coaching or one-on-one coaching, depending on circumstances.
That's great. And which brokerage are you at?
With Real Broker.
Okay. And I've had a couple of people on before from Canada who have told me a little bit about how real estate is practiced in Canada. Have you ever practiced real estate in the United States?
No.
You came directly from Romania to Canada?
Yeah.
And by the way, she's from Romania, folks. She came to this country when she was 27 years old, and she speaks incredibly beautiful English and does not have a particular accent, is a self-made person who has pulled all of this together. I'm always very, very impressed when people are immigrants to our area. It seems to me that is a very interesting choice. What led you to come to the United States?
I always say that people born in the United States or in Canada, they don't really appreciate what they have. And if you want a reality check, go in other places to see how life is in other places before you make a decision of how you're going to take advantage of being born in this side of the world. So I grew up in a communist country where we didn't have food, we didn't have heat in the house. It was challenging, a true communist country. We were one of the most communist country that you can imagine in the 80s. And
Mhm.
these were my first 10 years of my life. And it was ingrained in me that the Americans will come and save us, which never
Oh,
happened. Um,
oh,
so it was almost like um, a story of my generation, of my parents. I can't even imagine as a parent to, have young children and be in that environment. But it was always in my mind that I have to leave the country and go on the west side of the world, which was in United States. I ended up in Canada. I didn't go that far. But it was really my parents' dream, and it became come true for me to move here. And the main reason for moving here, because by the time I was actually 27, the revolution came in Canada, so we were no longer a communist country, but it was very, very difficult to make a living in there. Things change over time. It's been 30 years now, but it's about having that opportunity. It's about
mhm.
being in an environment where if you do work and you're willing to work, you are going to be rewarded for your work and you're going to be able to make something out of yourself. So that led me to come here without having any type of security or idea of what I'm going to do. Or my school was, in order to immigrate to Canada, we had to be super duper qualified, have
Right.
university, have all sorts of skills in order to be, accepted in this country as an immigrant. And all of that completely vanished the second you put foot in this country, because none of your skills or education meant anything.
Right.
The constant reply was, you don't have Canadian experience. How
Right.
could I have Canadian experience? Just give me a chance. So the idea was to come in an environment where you have more opportunities. I think at the time I was young and naive, and I underestimated what it means to be an immigrant, because it's beyond just how hard it is to break through in an environment that is not yours. It's the sacrifice that you have to make in order to be here without your family, without an environment where you feel comfortable, without even thinking in a language that's not yours, without feeling at home. And that's something that an immigrant goes through their entire life, because you're never going to be at home. You're always going to be an immigrant, regardless if you have an accent or you don't have an accent. Your family is there, your roots are there. You
Mhm.
basically, if you ever been up to 7 years old, that's where your mind is and that's where your soul is.
Right.
So you kind of underestimate these things, but in the same time, you kind of have that fire that probably locals don't have. I'm an immigrant. I'm going to make it work. I know where I came from. Nothing can buy me, but nothing can destroy me. I'm going to make it work no matter what. And we take advantage of that. So
No, it's fantastic. And I'm the child of people that also came to this country. My father's parents were from Minsk and Pinsk in Russia, and my mother's family was Icelandic. And during the recent political times, I've looked into getting Icelandic citizenship, but I can't because my mom wasn't born in Iceland. She was born in Canada. So I guess I could try for Canadian citizenship,
yeah,
but it's an interesting thing for me because the immigrant experience, if people are generations removed from that, they don't understand the power of culture on people when they come into this environment. I mean, my father's parents they always spoke with incredible thick accents. They basically hung out with other people from Russia. My mother's family, same thing. The Icelandic Christmas Club. The they assimilated to a certain point. But I think that if you are older when you come to this country, you can't fully assimilate.
no,
My
no,
stepfather was from Austria. He had the thickest German accent his whole life. He was a very cultured, extremely educated man, but but he did not lose it. So that accent always pins you as
Very.
other in some way. But it
Yeah.
also is a superpower, as you say, because you've had to be so brave to be here. You've had to be so convinced that your dream was worth fulfilling to be
Yeah.
here, and I think you appreciate the freedoms and the situation that Canada provides for you as a citizen there. And a lot of people here take it for granted. They take
Yeah.
all of our freedoms for granted.
You have to be very strong, and I'm talking right now, if any of your audience happen to be in this demographic, you have to be very strong to push above the rejection that comes naturally in this business as it is, regardless of your background, to the fact that some people won't work with you because you have an accent or because you look in a certain way, and you have a background, and even though you may think that may not apply in a country like Canada where it's so multicultural, believe it or not, you have different way of communicating, different way of doing things, different way of interpreting actions or even words. And that's a discrepancy between you and your prospects. And then at a higher level, for example, within the industry, you're always going to be up to a certain extent until you really proved yourself multiple times, you're going to be the second choice.
Mhm. And then also, there was a wonderful politician here named Ann Richards. She's passed on now, and she said of women, "Remember, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but she did it dancing backwards and in high heels." So both also as a woman coming to this country
Add
as
that layer on top of it.
it's a whole other
And
thing.
things, yeah, things changed a lot. I would say in the last couple of years when it comes to leadership, women in leadership in real estate. But in 2011, besides all the other layers of my accent, the way I look, the way I speak, and so on, it was this layer of being a woman in an environment where being an educator, being a coach, or being, a leader. And I always said I'm the most grateful person to be born a woman. I would have never want to be anything else. But it does add another layer in an environment where it was predominantly male at the time. Things change; they're still there, but
Actually, I can give you some stats on that. Over 68% of realtors who work in the field are women, and then the remaining 30% are men, and 50% of the remaining 30% of men who are realtors are people of color. And less than 9% of the executive offices in real estate companies are held by women. Just to give you an idea of the power dynamic and thrust of it, which was also part of why I've
yeah,
created this podcast,
yeah.
because all of these new regulations around commission actually hurt a workforce of women who largely got into it because it was a profession where they could make money on their own, but also where they could possibly have time to pick their kid up from school, take care of an elderly parent. It to me, these commission lawsuits are essentially misogynistic, racist attacks. Let's just put it where it.
I would be curious, out of the amount of male percentage that you just mentioned, how many of them are team leaders or broker owners?
Yep.
Are the majority of the workforce is covered by women?
Right. Now, the other part of it too is that women naturally, we gravitate towards feelings, towards, we have intuition. We are people pleasers, a lot of us. We work with whole family dynamics. Women have tended to be the people that did the shopping, did the cooking, did
The
the
invisible labor, it's covered by us.
right. But the other part of that is that when you are helping someone to purchase or sell a home, you have kind of a more innate understanding of the whole process of all of it. And also, whenever we meet people in real estate, somebody's died, somebody's had a divorce, somebody's kids have gone off to college, somebody's had a new baby, somebody's gotten married. There are all these incredibly very, very emotional times in people's lives. And I think that in our culture, at least in American culture, and I think Canadian as well, women have tended to be the caretakers of feelings. And therefore, we have been a little bit better equipped to deal with these kinds of very, very stressful, because even the happy stuff is stressful, times in people's lives. So it's kind of interesting that that dynamic actually it helps you to be a woman in a sense in real estate, or to be in touch, I should say, with your feminine side if you're a man.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think you brought up a very important point that it's so crucial in organizing as a real estate professional yourself into your business. There's this invisible labor that a lot of people are not taking in consideration, such as who's doing the appointments, who's doing the shopping, who's doing the laundry, who's taking the kids to soccer practice, who's doing all of these things that are basically still labor, and most of the time in a household are covered by women, sometimes by men, no discrimination there, but by nature are covered by women, and especially by realtor women.
Ray, I knew that was going to happen. Thank you.
No worries.
All right.
Especially realtor women are considered almost by default that they should cover the invisible labor and the work of being a realtor.
Oh,
That,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
but that, as you said, being over time and over years used to that, it actually gives us an insight of the household that
Mhm.
gives us a better idea of the purchasing process with our clients, giving that we know that portion of a household.
And also the neighborhood. And beyond knowing the neighborhood, we are all inveterate multitaskers. And real estate as a profession, if nothing else, is completely a whole different set of multitasks that we have to perform. You have to be a terrific marketer. You have to also know how to take people around and show them things. You have to know how to work with designers and stagers and painters and floor people. And you need to be able to talk to inspectors about inspections. You need to be able to
Yeah.
talk with structural engineers about foundations. So all of these things that we do, which are not necessarily normally grouped together as something under one profession, are the things that we bring. We coalesce all of that. There's a transdisciplinarity in the work that we do that I think is uniquely geared towards people that can multitask well.
Yeah.
And I think women just by our lives end up in situations where we're forced to be great multitaskers all the time. And also if you're a parent, my goodness, what are you dealing with? You have little tyrants who are dealing that you have to handle every day of your life.
Makes
So
us better dealing with clients.
exactly. How many kids do you have?
I have one of my own and two of my husband from a previous marriage.
How old are your kids?
My daughter is 22 and
Oh,
my stepchildren are 32 and 30. So
oh, okay.
we have
Grown-ups.
yes, growing ups. Yes.
Yes, you have step friends, as I like to call mine. So very,
Yeah,
very
they're
cool.
still kids. I still find it like they're my kids. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's very, very good. So the other thing I would say about your focus and specialization on listings, what drew you to that in particular?
It came the first time as a necessity. I was here as a new parent, not that new. My daughter was 5 at a time, and I find myself impossible to drive buyers around at times where I needed to be home, or I needed to pick up my daughter, I needed to drop her off. So what initially came as an inconvenience, it was actually, the best thing that could happen to me in this career. It drive me towards working with sellers, and it helped me tremendously to create a sustainable business, and a business that allow me to scale much easier because I learned how to work with sellers from the day one. It also allowed me the idea of working with sellers come in place as I didn't have a sphere of influence to reach out. I didn't know a single soul in this country. So I had to apply the common sense and say, where what's the product that I'm selling? It's
Mhm.
homes. Where are these homes? Are on the street. Who owns these homes that can make a decision? The sellers. So let's go and talk with them and find a way to be in front of them, because it's much harder to find a buyer. How would you find a buyer if you don't have the money to pay for Facebook ads? There's no social media at a time, and you have no sphere of influence. There's no way to find a way of where buyers are raising their head and say, "Hey, I'm interested in buying." But sellers potentially could be in some of these homes.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, a normal trajectory for an agent is to start in the business and work with tons of buyers, and then eventually, a few years down the line, that buyer goes to sell their house and they call you up because you're their agent, and then you do well with that, and then through the neighborhood, people hear about you, and then you get more and more listings. I'm personally 92% listings, by the way, at
Yeah,
this point in my career,
yeah,
but that's after 27 years.
yeah. It's funny because when I got into real estate, I was advised by everyone in my office, broker, record manager, to work with buyers and work with
Hmm.
leases. And it didn't work out. Like, common sense told me that I don't have a way to work with these people. And
Hmm.
and then I realized very quickly by going into trainings related to prospecting, and then later on, as I developed my own way of getting listings, you don't have to be in the business for a long time to become a listing agent. There's listing
Correct.
agent, you can literally become listing agent from the moment you finish school. You finish
Hmm.
your course, you become a listing agent. You have to learn what to do. You have to learn what to say. You have to learn how to market yourself. You have to learn all the systems and automations in place, and you become
Hmm.
a listing agent. The part that comes with being a listing agent that people may not feel comfortable is the discomfort of being rejected, and also the time it takes to learn to become a listing agent. Becoming a listing agent, it's much harder than being a buyer agent, but it does pay off. And why it's harder, because you have to learn to price properties, which means you're going to have to go and preview properties every single day. You have to learn how to keep track of trends, why things are selling more than others. You have to learn to create trust to your prospects. You have to have a killer listing presentation, which means you're going to have to learn to deal with objections. You have to have all of these qualities in one package, which means it's way more work than getting someone in the car, and not trying to diminish the quality of a buyer agent that would go and negotiate for you. But the process of a buyer making a decision is much easier because they have control on the process. Basically, they go and they look at a house and they say, even if if my agent would push me, I still am in control to make a decision based on the
Hmm.
features and benefits and the value that I think this house has. I'm going to offer a certain amount of money. And not only that, I'm not even playing with my own equity because I'm paying with the bank's money. Where with the seller, and that's why you're going to see buyers hiring almost anyone that's willing to open the door, because they know that they're in full control. But when it comes to having your own equity that you already work for 20 years and put it in the hands of someone that you have
Be
no
much more
idea what
careful.
they do at the back end, what you have to do the work, it's at the beginning, which is I'm going to have to learn how to create value from the day one to that person, to trust me that what I'm advising or what I'm doing at the back end that they can see, it's exactly what they need. And there's absolutely no doubt that I'm the only person that can do that for them. So that's a much harder job to do. But people that learn the system, they can do that literally from day one. There's no difference from someone 20 years in the business than someone 1 year in the business, as long as they're willing to put in the work, do the due diligence, learn how to price, and learn how to manage people's expectation and their emotions.
I think that two things. One is that learning to price is a huge thing, and
Huge.
it kind of requires a certain amount of sort of historical memory as to what's sold, knowing how to put a comparative market analysis together, and understanding why something might have sold for $300,000 more than another house. And that actually does take some time to learn those things. It's sort of like when you get your driver's license, you don't really know how to drive a car. It takes you a little while to figure out really how to drive and how much attention and focus you have to give to whatever it is. Same thing with being a listing agent. And I actually disagree with you a little bit about the buyer's agents, because right now we're in a crisis around buyer's agents, because most of what's happened with these lawsuits and things has affected buyer's agents. And you are right, there are a lot of really lame buyer's agents out there. That is absolutely true. And they really are just door openers because they haven't thought through what they're doing. But a really terrific buyer's agent is worth gold. A really terrific buyer's agent, they're not getting in the car for 30 hours a week anymore. Usually the clients drive themselves, you meet them at the property. The clients also go to open houses themselves, and you go back after they've liked something. What the buyers are looking to you for as a buyer's agent is to understand all of the disclosures, understand what it's going to cost to buy that house, both emotionally, mentally, and of course, financially. And that person needs to be able to have good referrals, references for you, good Rolodex of people that can do work on the property, a good Rolodex of mortgage lenders, and to understand all of the vagaries of that part of the experience. So I actually disagree with you a little bit about that, but I do
just want to make a clarification so we understand the miscommunication there. I don't think that the buyer doesn't have a value. I think the buyer agent doesn't have a value. I think the buyer considers that a buyer agent has less value because they feel that they're in control at all times.
And I agree with you about that statement, but I also think it's really incumbent upon all of us as realtors to really educate our clients around the different aspects of what it is we do when we begin working with them. Yeah. And the buyer is genuinely in control, but then again, the seller is as well. Like I had last year, I closed 45 transactions, but I also had 15 sellers decide not to sell because the market was bad.
Yeah.
Those were listings that I had taken, and they just went, you know what, we're not doing it this year. And, you of course have to, accede to that because it's their house, it's their money, it's their property, but they themselves made those choices. So I do believe that sellers have a lot of control as well, but a seller is going to be a lot more sophisticated because they've been through the real estate market at least once, and they do understand our value. So it's incumbent upon us to train our clients to know.
100%. Always comes down to educating your clients. I think you mentioned something, and it's worth diving into it. And maybe give me a little bit of background in case I missed any of these things in regards to the NAR settlement. Which way they changed the game for a buyer agent?
It's fascinating, actually. They set things up so that in the United States now, a buyer does have to have a buyer broker agreement with their agent. And in that agreement, all of the duties of the buyer and the agent are stipulated, but also how much they are going to pay their agent in the event that a seller is not paying commission. And a whole bunch of paperwork changed so that the seller, either has agreed to pay a certain amount of commission, or they've agreed to entertain the idea of commission, or they're saying they're not going to pay commission. It would have been a lot simpler if the DOJ had just set it up so that the listing agent was paid by the seller and the buyer's agent was paid by the buyer. But they did not do that, and it created this very weird netherworld. And in that netherworld, a lot of buyers' agents are scared to talk to their clients about being paid because they're worried that their clients reject them.
Why do you think it's that?
I think that buyers agents, some of them have a lot of fear. I think they're newer in the business. I have no problem talking to people about any of this stuff because I've been around for a very, very long time. And also because I come from a background of theater where I'm very used to rejection and consequently I'm fine with it. But But I do believe that it's scary. It's scary to actually put yourself out there to the point where you say to someone, you're going to need to pay me. And that's because that's coming from a lack of self-worth and a lack of a sense of scarcity inside, because they have to believe that they're worth it so that they can communicate adequately to their client why they're
So,
worth it.
so now let me ask you, if they're not capable of communicating with their own client about their own worth, do you think they're in a position of being the best agents for their clients in
Absolutely
negotiating with
not.
other?
Absolutely not. Those people are going to have to get a backbone and are going to have to get stronger in order so that they can negotiate well on behalf of their client. Because if they can't advocate for themselves, how the hell are they going to advocate for their client? Right?
Yeah.
So it's a real problem, and I think that it partially comes too from a lot of gobbledygook that people have been hearing out there in classes and in books for a long time, where we are told that we are the trusted advisor, we are the we're essentially the person that helps the person buy or sell, and so nobody thinks about the actual aspect of closing a deal ever. It's hard to get people to close. You need to button things up with people sometimes, and you need to be clear, specific, honest, authentic, and focused. And I think that that's hard for a lot of younger agents. I don't think that they learn that. So,
But it's not impossible.
oh no, no, no. They need a coach like you. They need somebody there to sort of, I've always said to people, when you see a buyer walk into a house and they find the house that they really want, the look on their face is not ecstasy. The look on their face is worry. And the reason why is because there is not a single person in the entire universe who wants to spend over $1 million. So they will immediately start putting whatever obstacles they can in front of what it is they're doing
Yeah.
in order not to buy that house. And you have to be able to get them over their own selves to the point where they
Yeah.
will buy something.
I think to a certain degree, obviously, is a change, and it could be scary for people just because people in general are scared of change. In Canada, we don't have yet that implementation, even though for the last 15 years, whatever I've been in real estate, I've never went out with a buyer without a signed contract. You can
Mm-hmm.
go out right now, not anymore. You need to sign a contract, but you don't negotiate and that only started in December. But you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to negotiate your own commission with the buyer yet. The seller still offers that, but it's mandatory to sign a contract. But it wasn't until December last year. And yet I've never went out with a buyer ever, even if it's someone that I know that purchased with me before, family member of someone I know, doesn't matter. You sign a
Mm-hmm.
contract. If not, that's okay with me. And I had people that said, I'm not. That's okay with me. Don't. You're not obligated to, but if you want to work with me, you are. Um,
And that is now what is the law for real estate
yeah.
agents.
But here's the thing. Now it's the law here as well, and it's the law there, which means that no agent can actually or buyer can work with someone without a signed contract. So it makes it
Right.
even easier than in my time where you were allowed to work without a signed contract, and I had to impose that as my minimum standards.
Right.
Here's the thing, in our contract says there that you could still demand a commission from a buyer even though you are paid by the seller. And I
Mm-hmm.
always had there a certain amount that I'd be paid, which would be the difference between what the seller wants to pay me or not. And if they pay me the entire amount, they pay me nothing. It's just a matter of learning a script and a good handling objection, nothing else than that. People are
Exactly.
making it way more complicated than it is.
I agree with you. And also, it's nice to have a document that, just like a listing agreement, that
Why
clarifies
why
their worth.
anxiety? Why anxiety that my client could actually go to an open house tomorrow, submit an offer after I work with them for 8 months? Why would
Exactly.
I'm really a professional, which means that I'm impose a minimum standard. And if the government didn't impose it, I impose it as being my
Mm-hmm.
minimum standard. So I never felt like it's being something taking away from me. What I think you mentioned at the beginning, and it's important to mention, is the difference between the perception of the consumer on our role as real estate agents versus the fact that the government steps in and tries to regulate this business more. The chances are that the regulations are not necessarily against us. They're making some people lives harder because they have to become more professional.
I agree. I agree. I
Yeah,
absolutely agree. I don't like it that the government stepped in, and I also don't like it that the lawyers adjudicating the
of course.
NAR lawsuits were making a standard professional fee of 40%. So it should not, I mean, when you go to the doctor, they charge you a specific amount. When you go buy an orange at a grocery store, they charge you a specific amount. I believe that the government should not have stepped in
I'm
and
not
started
aware of
making.
that. So they put what was the
They
standard?
believe that having the seller pay the entire commission was essentially price fixing because the standard rate in our area is either a 5% or 6% commission, usually split evenly between both the listing agent and the selling agent. They believe that this was unfair to the sellers because they were being forced to pay something that they shouldn't have had to have paid. And you can go one way or the other, but the reality is that the only difference between the seller paying the commission on both sides and the seller paying the commission on one side and the buyer's agent paying the other commission is that that buyer will take that money that they've had to pay to
Of
their
course,
agent into account when they make their offer. And
of course.
so it,
But let
it
me ask
doesn't
you,
really benefit
yeah,
anybody.
let me ask you because you mentioned something very important. Did they put like a restriction on what the seller can offer, or just
No,
that sell? No. So basically, they're giving the seller, which was even before, you can go
right,
to the seller and say, Mr. Seller, you can offer as much as you wish. I
right.
can charge that much. You can decide to offer whatever. It's the conversation was in place even before this regulation. That
Absolutely.
a good listing presentation to a place where you actually compete. And in my view, the way I conducted my business, I work with expires for sell by owners, which means I'm going to compete with a lot of people, and I need to present the commission structure. So
Hmm.
and I need to also take in consideration the fact that there's other agents that are going to go there and present the commission
Hmm.
portion. At the end of the day, you can only present the seller the facts. The decision is yours. In my view, the conversation of the commission was always in place, and the
Yeah.
liberty of the seller to make a decision was always in place. And the best example is with for sale by owners. When we take it for sale by owners, usually what they don't want to pay a commission.
Right.
That's it. There were for sale by owners before. If everything was price fixed, that means there would have been no for sale by owners.
Bingo. And the contract itself, at least in the United States, at least in California, it states very clearly that the commission is paid from the proceeds of the sale. It does
Yeah.
not specify that the buyer or the seller pays that commission.
Yeah.
So they adjudicated something, spent billions, not
Of
millions,
course, it was the making money.
billions of dollars
Yeah.
on something that was not necessary at the
Yeah.
first, and it's intrusive and disrespectful in the extreme. So that's my feeling on it. Other people may have a different feeling. I think the buyer broker agreement is a great thing. I think it's fine,
Yeah.
and I think that as you say, because it's now it's regulated and it has to be there,
Yeah.
it's going to become easier for buyer's
Easier,
agents
much easier.
to
Yeah.
do it.
I
But
had
you're
an
right.
issue before because everybody was telling me nobody's working with the contract. But now it's easier because you can go and say, try.
You can't even show a property now without
Yeah,
having
no,
without
with
having that
yeah,
contract.
yeah, it's
That's
the same.
interesting that in Canada it's the same as
It's
here
the
that
same,
way.
yes, because they kind of wanted to mimic in order to
Mhm.
avoid in the future potential lawsuits like that.
Mhm.
We're way more regulated than United States. To me, honestly, when I looked at it, it wasn't an issue. For a lot of people, it was an issue. For me, it wasn't an issue. I think it comes down to, again, are we minimizing the quality and the what agents are actually bringing to the table to this industry for the consumers? The fact that we're regulated, that we need to disclose things to the client, that we need to sign more paperwork that are in the favor of the consumers, I don't have a problem with any of that. I've done it before, even before that. I had my Schedule A's that weren't even imposed by the brokerage, because I want to do things in this way that now it's a standard procedure right now.
Right.
So they don't really interfere with my business. And I think the good part of it that can come out of this is that agents that were occasional agents that don't actually know
They'll leave the business.
Value, they're going to leave the business. And that over time, it's going to better our image towards the consumers. But again,
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I've been a realtor now for 27 years.
Yeah.
And what I have experienced in the last 10 is that with the advent of Zillow becoming the behemoth that it is, and some of these other companies that are attempting very seriously to disrupt real estate as we know it, you have to get sharper and stronger in the game, absolutely. But the other part of it is that there is an active campaign against realtors, and we have to fight against that because we have not done a good enough job. We do it one client at a time, proving our worth, but we haven't done a good enough job in increasing the public's understanding, educating the public about what it is we do and why it is important. No one is going to be able to buy a house by pushing a button. It doesn't work that way.
I mean, they could try. I think one of the things that they could try. One of the things that I always go back to it is the fact that a transaction between a buyer and a seller, and especially at this price point and their best equity in their lifetime, it's an emotional decision. And that's where, even though technology is going to evolve, and I think if we're unrealistic to not acknowledge that it happens and learn how to leverage it and learn how to work around it as service providers, I think it would be a mistake. I still truly believe that the need of that third party, that it's not emotional attached to the outcome, and that allows you to have proper advice, it's still needed. So I don't believe that real estate agents are going to disappear. I think there's going to be a shift and a change in the way the service is going to be provided and to what level. And again, it's going to be even more and more accent on the value that you bring and the way you know how to express that value to your clients in order to hire you.
Well, that's a really wonderful ending point for this podcast. You are so bright and so interesting, my fellow Andrea, that I'm really pleased to have had you on the show today. Andrea, where can they find you if they want to buy a house or sell a house in Toronto or environs? How do they get a hold of you, and how do they possibly get your coaching services, because you're brilliant and wonderful?
Thank you. The easiest way to reach me out is on Instagram, _Andrea Blum. And anytime you message me there, I'm there all the time. It's my love language. buildallrealestate.com is my coaching program, and you can find there everything in terms of pre-recorded free resources, online webinars, one-on-one coaching. Everything is in there. And if you want to buy and sell, it's a Bloom team in North York, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So if you have any referrals, you know where to find me.
Most excellent. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's it. Thank you so much. I think that was a really enlightening, interesting session. Don't you? I feel like people are going to get a lot of value out of that. And
I hope so.
You gave some really wonderful advice. So thank you again. And I hope our paths cross. And I certainly will send somebody to Toronto if I ever have a client there.
Sounds good. Right. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Realizations Podcast. I hope our conversation has shed light on the true essence of real estate and the people behind it. As we wrap up, I want to extend my gratitude to our listeners for their support and engagement. Your feedback drives the heart of this podcast, and I look forward to continuing this journey with you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to the Realizations podcast and leaving a review. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our message of positivity in the real estate industry. Until next time, remember to keep an open mind, embrace empathy, and always seek the good in every situation. I'm Andrea Gordon signing off from Realizations. See you next time.